we want to understand why net income is insufficient in order to measure profits to shareholders. So net income, that is your accounting income. Your accounting income overstates the true return to shareholders, because if you think about what net income is, it is income after interest expense. So it is income that has satisfied the bondholders, the debt holders, but it is before dividends or any other dollar cost of equity. So in that sense, it would overstate the return to shareholders. So basically what we mean is that even if we have a positive net income, positive EPS, that may not necessarily be sufficient to satisfy the cost of equity required by the shareholder. So here in this reading, we come up with a more advanced metric, which is called residual income. So it is actually net income after we try to account for the dollar cost of equity. And how do we do this? We've got the classical formula here. Let's look at it. So residual income for the year will be net income for the year. So remember, that's just your accounting profit minus the cost of equity expressed as a percentage multiplied by the opening book value of equity. Very important here. Keep an eye on the subscripts. So to calculate the residual income for the year, so at year end, we would have to use opening book value of equity. And if you think about this item here, cost of equity times book value of equity, that is actually the dollar cost of equity. So what we are saying with this formula is that even if our net income is positive, if we are not meeting the dollar cost of equity, we could still have negative residual income and we could be destroying value. Now, this metric can be calculated on a pre or post-levered basis. So the formula you're seeing here is the post-levered basis, meaning that we have already subtracted interest. If we want to calculate it on a pre-levered basis, we would start with EBIT, which is before interest. We will tax the EBIT. And then from that, we would have to subtract the dollar cost of capital for the entire company. Given certain simplifying assumptions, for example, the cost of debt correctly reflects the interest expense on the income statement, both the pre and the post-levered versions of residual income should give me the same result, as I shall illustrate in a minute. A couple more terms that I want you to be aware of on this slide. The first one is EVA, which stands for economic value added. Notice here it is a registered trademark because it was developed and registered by Stern Stewart Company, which is a management consultant company. And you will notice that it's actually pretty much what I described as the pre-levered version of residual income, with a few variations that Stern Stewart Company came up with. But basically, in a nutshell, what you do is you take NOPAT. NOPAT is net operating profit adjusted for taxes. So that's effectively your EBIT, your operating income adjusted for taxes. And then you're subtracting the dollar cost of capital. Well, that's EBIT to 1 minus T, minus the percentage WACC times the total capital. Think of the total capital as the book value of debt plus the book value of equity. Without going into too much detail on how EVA actually differs from pre-levered residual income, suffice it to say, Stern Stewart Company decided to do some modifications. For example, instead of expensing R&D, as you know, in the US, we have to expense R&D. They decide to capitalize it. They also remove deferred taxes, so purely focusing on cash taxes paid, and also adjust for non-recurring items, among other adjustments. The next concept that is closely related to EVA is the concept of MVA. After all, they do sound very similar. MVA stands for market value added, And basically what we are saying is that if I've got EVA that's positive, I am a value creator. Remember, Stern Stewart Co, a management consultant, so they come to your company, tell you how you should be doing your job better to be a value creator. So let's make sure we have positive EVA. If we have positive EVA, we are going to be value creators. That's going to then mean that we're going to have positive MVA. And MVA is going to be defined as the delta between the market value of the firm and the book value of the firm. So think of the market value of the firm as the market value of equity and debt. And of course, the book value will be the book value of equity and debt. So effectively, if I am a value creator, over time, I should generate a positive MVA. You could actually think of MVA as the sum from I equals 1 to infinity of EVAI over 1 plus, let's say, WACC here to the power of I. So it's basically the present value of the EVAs. If I'm value creator, the present value of the sum of future EVAs will be the market value added, which in turn will be the difference between how much providers of finance input into the company in the form of debt and equity and the actual market value of debt and equity. Because often we are going to assume that book value and market value of debt are the same. The MVA often, in a lot of simplified questions, would be simply the difference between the market value of equity and the book value of equity.